Welcome to Soft Talk. The Israelis and the Palestinians, they clash frequently. The Palestinians, they pelt stones at Israeli security personnel, and then Israeli forces also retaliate. It may not always happen in that order, but areas like Gaza Strip are always tense. The Intifada movement of the Palestinians, it is known for pelting stones at Israeli security personnel. They have land disputes. Their animosity is well known and well published. But Nepal and India, they are considered friendly countries. They are friends in need and they are neighbors like the Israelis and the Palestinians. In the officialis, we have a very old, ages old, cordial and special relations. But incidents, several incidents point, they question the official version of Nepal-India relations. Just a few days ago, Nepalese and Indian nationals clashed at the Mahakali river banks. They pelted stones on each other. Now let me read a couple of reports about that stone pelting incident. The Indian Express writes on its December 4, 2022 edition, a tense situation prevailed on the Indo-Nepal border in Pithoragarh, Uttarakhand on Sunday evening following stone pelting against laborers from the Nepali side. The stone pelting comes at the backdrop of Nepalese organizations objecting to construction of an embankment over the Kali River by India. Our publications, our newspapers, our news portals have also reported the incident. Earlier, when India unilaterally started constructing an embankment along the Mahakali River, Nepali nationals protested. They protested because they feared, and their fears were not unfounded, that this construction would channel the Mahakali waters into Nepali settlements, displacing hundreds of people. That's why they protested. There have been earlier incidents also in which Nepali children, Nepali nationals sustained injuries when the contractor, the contractor tasked with the construction of that embankment, blasted stones. Those splinters, they hit children. In an earlier instance, a 9-year-old boy died when the contractor uh, carried out explosion while constructing a road along the Mahakali River. It's a very contested territory. The clashes have been frequent, uh, and this unilateral construction on the part of India, this seeks to change the status quo along the border between Nepal and Mahakali, uh, between Nepal and India at Mahakali. Other than that, it's a well known fact that India has its security presence on 400 square kilometers of land that belongs to Nepal. That is the Mahakali, Lipulek, Limpiadhura area. Let's go back a little bit. Let's return to 1962. It's like a needling, a festering wound, but the history, it cannot be just ignored, it cannot be forgotten. After the Sino Indian War of 1962, the vanquished Indian troops came to this area, this 400 square kilometer Lipulek, Kalapani, Limpiadhura area, and they just sought refuge in that area. At that time, the state, the Nepali state, had a very thin presence over there. As of this date, also, the Nepali state does not have very strong presence, whether it's in the hinterlands or in other peri-urban areas of the country, in the far-flung areas of the country. So it was uninhabited. Uh, these people, the Indian security personnel, started staying there in course of time. They built camps, helipads, health posts, and even temples on that stretch. The Nepali state became aware of the presence of Indian security personnel in that area, and it demanded that they evacuate that area since it belonged to Nepal. But they refused to budge. So this refusal, this occupation of the area has it has just intensified. It has just made this row over the origins of the Mahakali River. Nepal points that it originates in the Nepali territory, in Limpiadhura, whereas India claims that it originates in Pithoragarh district. So they have this long running dispute over the origins of the Mahakali River. Now debate, this debate, this row over the origins of the river has just aggravated further. Not only the highlands where the river originates, but the lower parts of the uh, basin also have seen increased Indian encroachments. That's a very worrying thing for Nepal. This one more thing about the Lipule Kalapani Limpiadura region. It's an all-weather pass. Uh, it's just it's a safe passage for the Nepalese to visit Tibet, to pay pilgrimage to Mansarovar, Kailas. So it's also a trade route for the Nepalese. So it's a very important place. It's a very important junction of geostrategic significance for Nepal. Back to the Mahakali River encroachment. Instead of presenting my own thoughts about the dispute, let me quote a report from The Rising Nepal. It's a state run, it's a state owned publication. So it just somehow just presents the official version on this dispute. Let me quote a portion of that report. Nepal sends diplomatic note to India. The headline screams in a way. It's dated December 7, as you can see, expressing concerns over the unilateral embankment construction. Point to note is that the report points that it's a unilateral embankment construction project. It's being built on the Mahakali River at the western border. Nepal has sent a diplomatic note to India. Spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Seva Lomsal, told the Rising Nepal that a note was sent to India on Tuesday via its embassy in Kathmandu. According to the MOFA, that is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the note includes Nepal's official stand on the issue and its expectations from India. That's it. The point to note here is the fact that this uh, this work, this work by India, Nepal government considers it as a unilateral construction. This unilateral embankment construction is not acceptable to Nepal. That is what this report points at. I was talking about the stone pelting incidents, the recent ones, in a series of such incidents across the Nepal India border at Mahakali. After this incident, uh, Times of India points reports that one construction worker was injured when Nepalese pelted stones while this construction work was going on. And some of the media outlets in Nepal have published reports. These reports inform that Indian security personnel have issued arrest warrants against the Nepalese accused of pelting stones. So it's a very tense situation out there. It's not only the Nepal India relations that are tense. There are two neighbors in a very tight spot, in a conflict situation in the neighborhood. It's India and China. They are clashing. They are in a standoff over Taiwan. Let me just read a part of this report published in the Times of India. India is keeping a close eye on Chinese troops' movements across the entire line of actual control after the major clash in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh last week. This even as the army recalibrates deployments during the ongoing transition to the annual winter posture. We are ensuring the readjustments of troops, combat reserves, logistical bases, and ammunition dumps due to the harsh winter and terrain conditions does not impede our response time and capability to handle any contingency. A senior army officer told TOI, that is the Times of India, on Wednesday. So it's a very tough situation for Nepal as well. Nepal is always at risk when the two neighbors clash. Remember that uh, Indian security presence on our soil, this continued presence at that 400 square kilometers of land, that highland, the Kalapani, Limpiadura, Lipulek region. So this when the when there is a clash between the Indians and the Chinese, Nepal almost always loses. Interestingly, even when they come very close, then also Nepal loses. Remember this 2050. Uh, uh, remember this uh, trade agreement between India and China. This 40-point agreement between India and China via the Lipu Lake. This agreement was aimed to facilitate trade and transit, and then this flow of Indian pilgrims to Tibet, to Mansarovar in particular. This pass also joins the Pithoragarh district of India with Tibet. So it's a very strategic route. It's a route, the Pithoragarh, Lipulek, Tibet route is a road. It's a road of geostrategic importance. The Defense Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, has already inaugurated this vital road link between India and China. But this, the point to remember is that the two neighbors signed this agreement to facilitate trade and movement of people between their two countries via Nepali territory, via a territory that considers Nepal to be her own without informing Nepal. So that agreement impinges on Nepal's national sovereignty. and territorial integrity. So, either way, whether the two neighbors are in conflict or they are in peacetime, whether when they are in conflict, Nepal loses. When they are enjoying cordial relations, Nepal is not safe on such occasions also. It is at risk of losing it is at risk of losing her territory. It is at risk of getting her national interest compromised. So it's a very delicate situation. It's a very sensitive situation for Nepal. It's always a precarious situation for Nepal in this geopolitical and geostrategic setting. But you cannot change neighbors. You can change friends, but you cannot change neighbors. And Nepal is in no position to seek hostility with either of those two neighbors. It's a peace loving country anyway, it's a peaceful country anyway, and it does not seek hostility with any of its neighbors or any other countries in the world. At one time, Nepal was a zone of peace, and several countries had endorsed that zone of peace proposal that then King Birendra floated during his coronation. So Nepal wants to be at peace with itself and the rest of the world. But then the world is not at peace. We were talking about this clash in Tawang. Then came this vitriolic attack from India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. He lashed out at this UN forum. Let me quote a report from NDTV. Multilateral platforms are being misused to justify and protect perpetrators of terrorism, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said on Wednesday during an open debate at the UN Security Council in a veiled attack on China and its close ally Pakistan. Presiding over the UN Security Council open debate on maintenance of international peace and security, new orientation for reformed multilateralism, Mr. Jaishankar also said the knock-on effects of conflict situations have made a strong case that it cannot be business as usual in the multilateral domain. And the challenge of terrorism, even as the world is coming together with a more collective response, multilateral platforms are being misused to justify and protect perpetrators. That is what he said. Then, after, in recent days, India and the United States conducted some joint drills along the border. This has also been widely reported in the wake of that Tawang incident. So the entire neighborhood is tense, and when the neighborhood is tense amid this uh, building and rebuilding of rival defense military alliances, Nepal is always at risk. A small and ill prepared country like Nepal is always at risk. It was in a similar setting in the 1950s that Nepal had to sign a peace and friendship treaty with India. This severely impinged on Nepal's national sovereignty. Then, when the winds of change blew in Eastern Europe and communist regimes collapsed, Nepal again paid a heavy price after the political changes of the 1990s. Remember, that was when Nepal had to sign this Mahakali Treaty, this unequal and unjust treaty with India. This treaty would literally gift the Mahakali River to India at the expense of Nepal's water sovereignty and national sovereignty. Looking back in the 1950s, after the political changes of the 1950s that just kicked out the Rana regime, Nepal had to part with the Kosi River system. And then, after some years later, that was during the reign of the Prime Minister, the Nepali Congress Prime Minister, Matrika Prasad Koirala. And when his brother BP Koirala came to power in the year that was in uh, around 1958, uh, it is the first thing that the BP Koirala government did was sign this Gandak agreement with India. This agreement would hand over another vital river system belonging to Nepal, the Gandaki River, to India at the expense of Nepal. Then came the Mahakali River Agreement, the Mahakali River Treaty in the 1990s that sold off the Mahakali River to India, literally. So it has always come at a price. All the changes have exacted a price, a heavy price at that, on Nepal's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. This thing is to be not forgotten. Despite all the rhetoric, it is quite difficult for neighbors to have very cordial relations. Their interests almost always tend to clash. Despite these differences, despite a tense world in the background, India and Nepal continue to work together on many fronts. This includes this military exercise. At on the one hand, people along the border frequently clash over things. They have friendly exchanges also, but these exchanges are often marred by such clashes as have taken place on the Mahakali riverbanks and several other areas. Despite this military drill is just starting from today. The Surya Kiran Nepal-India joint military exercise is taking place. Uh, it is beginning at Rupandehi district, Salzhandi in Rupandehi district, with around 350 people, 350 military personnel from both sides taking part in it. It's a 16 fortnightly, it's a 14-day exercise. It's a yearly event. Notably, Nepal also conducts, the Nepali army in particular, it conducts such exercises with the US Army also and the Chinese PLA also. Notably, the exercise with the PLA has come to a halt. It is the official version is that it has come to a halt because of this COVID pandemic in China, because of this COVID cases in China. This exercise also comes. It has a whole new meaning in the backdrop of these building and rebuilding of rival defense military alliances. This should not be forgotten in the backdrop of this clash between India and China, recurring clashes between India and China, and this war in Ukraine. In conflict situations, Nepal's security concerns always are at the risk of being compromised. They are always at uh, stake. So we have just uh, veered off. We are no longer sticking to this non-aligned stance. We seem no longer uh, to be the what you call the fence sitter in our diplomacy, in our international relations. We are more and more inclining towards a particular defense military alliance. So be it if it serves our national interests. So be it if it addresses our national security concerns. So be it if it makes Nepal stronger. But will it do that? The question, like, it's the answers to this question, the answers are not blowing in the wind. Choppy waters, roiling waters are ahead for Nepal, and we ought to tread with caution. On this note, I wrap up this edition of Soft Talk. I'm really sorry if it's like if all this is sounding like a sermon, like some preaching, but it is not. I have tried to just base my presentation on facts and facts alone, and it is not targeted against any country, any defense military bloc, but it is at its heart is uh, the national interest of Nepal, the welfare of Nepal and the Nepalese, and nothing else. With this note, I wrap up this edition of Soft Talk. This is our initiative uh, to promote citizen journalism, unhyphenated journalism, if you like. We are free from vested interest groups. We have no axe to grind against anyone. This is for the sake of Nepal and the Nepalese. So we request you all to subscribe to this channel, comment on our presentation, and press the like button if it really touches your hearts and minds. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.